Good evening. Hello. We welcome everyone onto YouTube channels. We welcome everyone watching on Fagan Live. We say good evening to everyone watching on Kurbanova Live. Thank you very much, friends, for being with us. It's Thursday evening. As always, we have something to discuss, especially since President Zelensky is in America or on his way to America. Mark Fagan is in America. I, friends, am in Kyiv. Damn it. Yet we still have something to discuss with you and how to spend this hour in the company of Mark Fagan. Mark, hello.
Glad to welcome Alina. Glad to welcome all the viewers of the Fagan Live channel, the Kurbanova Live channel, and of course, those watching us live on the Fagan Live Telegram channel account and also on Network X, where the live broadcast is happening on the Fagan Live account.
Friends, wherever you are watching us, don't forget to support us. Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the Fagan Live YouTube channel, and subscribe to the Kurbanova Live YouTube channel. Remember that, of course, we are always very interested in having our audience, a thoughtful audience. Stay with us and, of course, support independent journalism. I, Mark, suggest we start with President Zelensky's visit. This will also be a question for our viewers. Friends, what do you think? Will President Zelensky, by personally meeting with Donald Trump, be able to improve US-Ukrainian relations? Tomorrow, there will be an official meeting with Donald Trump. There has been a lot of speculation. Today, information emerged that Trump didn't want to, but Macron persuaded him. But most importantly, just before our meeting, Donald Trump gave a small briefing where he was asked, listen, you said President Zelensky is a dictator. To which Donald Trump replied, did I say that? And naturally, one might assume, oh my, Donald, you have such a subtle sense of humor. President Zelensky is a comedian. You're joking. It seems that Donald Trump, in principle, might not even remember what he said. What do you think? In what atmosphere might the meeting take place, where perhaps Donald Trump no longer remembers about the 4%?
Look, if this document, the agreement on the exploitation of Ukrainian resources, is certainly agreed upon, then his mood will certainly undergo a change, but that's purely a personal aspect. He will meet with Zelensky, he will discuss, he will adhere to a certain protocol. But he will be satisfied that he pushed through and got what was necessary, and accordingly, I don't know, Zelensky did well to sign. He will immediately become legitimate rather than the 4%, and you already have a dictator whose powers have expired since May. That's easy for him. Just the day before yesterday, I had a broadcast with one of the psychoanalysts, and he talked about Trump's psychopathic meme nature. Many people somehow quarrel about this debate, but that's good. It's a matter of his personal reaction. I think this is surmountable, and I mentioned that people say it's unchangeable and so on. I adhere to the theory that he can change his attitude towards both Putin and Zelensky, but certain triggers need to occur for that. However, again, so to speak, only time will tell. I will be extremely cautious if agreements on resources, those notorious rare earth metals, well, if in this agreement and others, the issue is resolved and signed in the form that the Ukrainian side certainly agrees to, then there might be a potential softening towards Zelensky. But there are some other things undoubtedly happening that I observe. Again, I am not asserting anything. I am not insisting on anything. This is solely my external perception of the situation, nothing more. You know, it seems to me that something has started happening in Trump's office, in his administration, in connection with this. He has made several recent statements that sound much more cautious about the prospects of peaceful regulation of the war in Ukraine. And here's what it's related to and why. In my opinion, Moscow has overstepped in terms of public perception, reaching a critical mass of unwillingness to negotiate on the most pressing issues of the peace agreement. Lavrov comes out, well, I can quote, we all saw it, and says, are the European contingents demilitarized? What? Did you agree with us? No. Stop at the line of contact. How can we stop at the line of contact when we have 4 regions? It's written in the Constitution that these are our regions: Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Luhansk, Donetsk, and so on down the list. Istanbul, Bürgenstock, under these preliminary conditions, sanctions, and everything else. Once they talk about it, twice they said it, 3 times they said it, perhaps in Washington, they started to scratch their heads, thinking, what if we actually come to some major negotiations and Trump arrives? But they tell him, no. He will say, but I publicly told Macron that you told me over the phone that you are not against the European contingent. Are you even normal? I've already made arrangements. I got into trouble because of you. You told me on the phone and I said it. And then your guy leaves like an idiot and says, no. How is that possible? Are you serious? Are you playing some kind of con game? Fooled the fool with 4 fists. Cheated. You were cheated. We almost burst and now we've cheated you. And I have a feeling that he said maybe it won't be possible to reach an agreement just like that. And maybe he says, yes, I really want to and I hope, but maybe it won't work out. He says, really. How is that? And the sanctions, he says, to lift them. No, he says, we won't lift the sanctions. First, he says, sign the ceasefire agreement. He says he's addressing Putin. Well, sort of, how is that? And you all seem to be all set there. You're meeting Europe, it seems, you don't need there. Ukraine, it seems, you don't need at these negotiations. We ourselves, says Susan, and you haven't done anything in 3 years. So do it, dear friend, please. Here he is. The bold one is right in front of you. Well, do it. Show others how it's done. What, can't you perhaps make peace by Easter? Indeed, surely, certainly, can't you bend your comrades by May? Now, are they publicly laughing at you? Well then, excuse me, what are you playing at? You've already signed up for who knows what? That it's all over, everything's set. Turns out, did they trick you? This hasn't reached a critical point yet. Although we predicted this, right, that Moscow would refuse. How many times have we talked about this? That he would come as a developer, let's play with the money. And Moscow says, yes, with the money, let's give it to you and Vitkov and, well, to your cleaners and Stormy Daniels. Do you want money? We'll send Stormy Daniels. He started discussing money and then he says, wait, under what conditions? And you give us Ukraine? Wait, what, Ukraine? But we've already sent you the money, haven't we? You're already there with Stormy, tell me. Already having fun in the pool, in the floating water, aren't you? Wait, you said that European contingents could be deployed, demilitarized. Are you stupid or something? Of course not. And now it seems to me that either this is starting to sink in, or they have begun to play this cautiously, a bit more cautiously, in the public narrative. And what if Moscow really backs out? Well, if indeed Lavrov came out, well, wait, he didn't say this over the phone. He comes out and says, no. Is he saying this on his own behalf? Here's a simple question I have. Is Lavrov just freeloading or something? Someone could say, Lavrov says one thing today and tomorrow he'll say another. Wait, do you really believe he'll say something different tomorrow? Or that Putin will say something different? No, well, again, we return to the analysis. Many people simply have this pro-Trump idea stuck in their heads that they'll push through just by their mere presence. They'll say, listen up. And if not, then what? Well, with Moscow, then what? And I can impose those 25% on Porsche, and I can do it to you with Porsche. To Putin, to Porsche. Are you serious? You can promise him autonomy. What difference does it make to him? What are you threatening him with? He's already, so to speak, completely at the ball. Does Moscow want to negotiate? Yes, they do. They want peace. Yes, they do. On their own terms? On their own terms, which imply the elimination of Ukraine as a sovereign state. And now they are doing everything, participating in negotiations, promising everything under the sun, so that Trump agrees to this. Everything. Second question, can Trump agree to this? Can he take responsibility for the complete surrender of Ukraine? Yes, it would be an instrumental mediated action in the form of stopping arms supplies, abandoning Europe, which might suddenly want to continue supporting Ukraine, starting to act in favor of Moscow at the UN or some other organization of philatelists. The answer is he cannot. This will be a problem. A big internal problem for the United States and for Trump's promises within the Republican Party towards American voters. He has a limit. There is a point where he will have to stop, to acknowledge and say, listen, I tried, but I didn't succeed, but you promised it would work out. And it seems to me that on the eve of Zelensky's visit and under the influence of this repeatedly stated public position of Moscow, perhaps in Trump's circle, his advisor might say, let's be more cautious for now until Moscow makes a move that at least somewhat resembles an indication that they are striving for a peaceful resolution, some form of truce, peace, or ceasefire. Let's not issue such an advance. I do not rule out that this situation will start to develop in this direction for one simple reason, because Moscow is not ready for any compromise. There is only one reason. It can promise the Arctic, saying, let's exploit the land resources together in the constitutional territory of Russia. Do you understand what they are hinting at? That Zelensky should sign and we will extract together in the Donetsk region, you and us, Vitkov and Dmitriev, Putin and Trump, in Donetsk, in Luhansk, wherever they are, in Zaporizhia, in Kherson, let's extract investments together, they say.
But he did say that they're in Novorossiya and Donbass.
Yes, he said it publicly. In Novorossiya and Donbass. And Trump, would he sign an agreement with Zelensky about this? There is a second story. It consists of the following. Here they are selling us, again, I won't name names as you don't understand. This is a variant of the Marshall Plan. If American investment money comes in through this agreement, then American soldiers will come to protect it. This money, well, first of all, this is not stipulated in any agreement. And secondly, there are public statements from Trump and his associates and others that no American soldiers will appear on the territory of Ukraine as long as we are in charge. Maybe they will appear later. Okay, we want to see that. But for now, the United States has not taken on such an obligation to protect its resource assets on the territory of Ukraine. Well, they can supply weapons or something else, but there is no such obligation yet. So there's no need to exploit this topic and say that half the American army is going to arrive there now. Only an idiot can claim that, a complete idiot who understands nothing about politics. There is another argument which let's refute right here. You don't understand, but Trump is so cunning. He's the king of the deal. He will sort of flatter Putin, play along with him, draw him in, seduce him, embrace him. Oh, wow, my incredibly smooth one. And then he'll soften up, stuff himself with meat, like in the movie, yes, and sign everything for him. Are you serious? Who are you trying to fool? Putin? I've already said that he taught where Trump studied, you understand. Putin was taught differently. Lie to the face. You know, in KGB schools, well, the former ones, now the FSB Academy and other institutions, there are several, they teach to lie, understand, to lie convincingly, authentically, truthfully, well, so that the facial expression matches. It's called a poker face, but it doesn't matter. They teach this, say everything that's needed, not what you want, not anything else. Say everything that's needed, lie, promise, give your word as an officer, something else, swear on your mother, on your own potency, that you'll cut off your own dick, lie. And they think that Trump, no matter how much of a super king he is, will take and deceive Putin, drag him into some of his, go ahead, sign it, son, sign it, don't be afraid. What's wrong? Don't worry, everything's fine, sign it. Give Ukraine this and that, withdraw the troops, something else. And do you think he will be deceived? Does anyone really think so? I'm just curious. No, is this the second time we're hearing this version? He's cunning. Trump's sly. He sold 2 buildings. He'll even sell Putin. You see, this feeling of a micro-level understanding in politics gives the same kind of analysis, but it's the environment around Trump that promotes this. Here, one clown, cross-eyed Veller, then another small one who walks between the legs in the salon, counts to 3. These are the riffraff who understand politics like a pig understands oranges, you see. And they tell stories here. And some people think, well, maybe Trump is good. He just wants to deceive Putin for the benefit of good people. He'll sign everything, and then Trump will outsmart him. Do you understand how? And that's why you can vote in the UN, you can make these statements, you can even prepare decisions regarding the change in the configuration of transatlantic security. Well, deploy American troops or something else. These people believe, you see, and we come here to dispel this illusion. Maybe it will dispel the illusion for Trump as well. By the way, I don't deny that he himself believes in it. He's the king of the deal. He thinks of it as a big deal and so on. He'll get involved and do everything. No, that won't happen. There will be a dick pic and nothing more from Putin's side. Well, let's be honest. You know.
How does Mark Fillingen know such words?
What do you mean? I'm a sophisticated type. Do you know that I'm an internet type? I know everything, really. So once again, I don't send such things. I just, so to speak, like to parasitize and collect anecdotal situations. So I use them as memes. But once again, I repeat, I must emphasize, do not harbor any illusions that on such a major historical and absolutely cardinal issue, it will be possible in any way, shape, or form to deceive Putin. It will not be possible to deceive him on the issue of war and peace, on the issue of his status in Eurasia. It won't be possible. This cannot be bought. There is no price that can be paid to him. Putin owns all of Russia. Are you kidding? We'll give him 300 billion, like Susie. Are you serious? He owns all of Russia, all of it. Putin doesn't own 100 billion, not a trillion. He owns all of Russia. Do you understand that? All of it. It's all like the Marquis of Carabas. Do they want to buy him for something, for some natural resources? Are you serious? It's indeed merely an instrument for Putin to purchase you as an ally, not for you to buy Putin. That's all there is about it. Therefore, I want to emphasize once again that we might soon enough, or perhaps not so soon, I don't know, face a situation where it becomes clear that Moscow really doesn't want to negotiate about anything except solely on its own terms, and that there is no compromise, and it is impossible. There's only one way: to concede everything to Moscow. And then on the horizon, there is perhaps a faint chance to agree on other issues. And the second part of this equation is that Trump cannot afford, no matter who he is or how he currently deals with allies, to make such an extreme deal at the expense of Ukraine. He cannot, there is no such authority, no such possibility. That's all.
Once in one of your episodes, maybe you also discussed this with Vitaly Portnikov, who visits you as a guest long before these events. Vitaly said, look, the Ukrainian president has undergone significant metamorphoses during the war. You know, at first he was criticized for saying, what's the difference, or for wanting to look Putin in the eye, meaning to find a middle ground. When President Zelensky actually faced this devil, this war, of course, his views changed drastically. Zelensky began to drift towards what he had criticized the previous government for. Today, our foundation is the army, the language, and our church. And Vitaly Ford said that inevitably and predictably, Trump will drift towards Biden. Whether he is bad or good, he had principles that he stood by. And these principles helped to create an anti-Putin coalition and more. But on the other hand, I want to ask you, let's return to the topic of rare earth metals from Russia. I understand that Donbass and Novorossiya, which Putin proposes, are of course a trap, trolling. All his tricks. But on the other hand, I look at what ordinary Russians write in social media comments, and a question arises. Wait, we went to defend the homeland, we went and died, we're left without arms and legs so that Russian territory would not be taken by anyone. In 2023, Putin himself said that all resources need to be protected because they want to be taken away. And now he is giving them to the Pindasi. Excuse me, but that's how Russians have always called those who sponsored the war against the SVO participants. So how is it like this? Why is he giving everything away even before the first wedding night?
Regarding these Novorossiya Tsars, I think he messed up. And who is asking you, we told you you are enslaved, you are in a concentration camp environment. Who is asking you, if they want, they will hand you over with your families like slaves. That's how it is. You'll go with chains. And who are you to be asked? Who are you? Putin is asking you, you believe that the government truly represents your sentiments? Are you serious? They'll turn the other way and they'll go like little darlings, just like to war and back from war, just like to a concentration camp and out of it. That's the essence of the system. The essence of your interaction with the authorities is exactly this. You are a subjugated herd, objectified, and they are the owners of the world. They can command you. They can even take your lives. They do take lives. You know, it used to be fashionable to say that Putin had this concordat, that he made a deal with society. You don't meddle in politics, and I won't meddle in your private life. Do whatever you want. I certainly won't kill you for your political views or lack thereof, or force any ideology on you. This is what distinguishes authoritarian and totalitarian systems. In an authoritarian system, indeed, the authoritarian power, despite all its harshness and repression, does not interfere in private life. Whether you're gay or you attend some kind of satanic church, what difference does it make to anyone if you're not meddling in power and politics, or in big money, which is essentially the same as big politics? And suddenly, year after year, they saw that the authorities were increasingly encroaching on this territory. Now, even LGBT is not about who you sleep with or what you say. A film critic was taken away for 5 years for a post in Russia. The film critic was taken away. She posted for peace, probably a wonderful woman, a good Russian woman, no doubt, against the war, all of it. And that's it. And she sits, do you understand how? And now nothing at all. Don't even breathe. The cop is breathing down your neck. You see, with a baton, no, let's speak as it is. And they think they are outraged. How can it be with you, with families, with children, and with pets? And you will be like pawns going from one master to another and back. Here's more. What are they outraged about? I don't understand what has changed. So sending them to death, what is that? Do they think they've gained some right in their own right now? I'll tell you one more thing. A historical reference to Stalin. You know, Solzhenitsyn described this feeling well in The Feast of the Victors. Soldiers and officers who, can you imagine, burned for 4 years with millions and millions of people killed. They thought, now we'll return from the front with medals. What repressions, what collectivization, we were dying here. And nothing. They were herded into camps like little lambs, again and again and again. The mustached one dealt with them all. And you know, even the tankers were in the country in armor. This is the famous Belaruski railway station. That's where they returned. Trains were coming with millions of people in uniform with weapons, returning. Well, take it off, hand over your gun. Sign here. And what were you doing there? What kind of letters were you writing? Well, during the war, they imprisoned him, so to speak, and so on. Because he was corresponding with Svetkovsky, they imprisoned him. And he was a batteryman, an artilleryman, and so on. By education, he was indeed naturally quite significantly a mathematician. He described it certainly well. And now they have a mouse here. I shed blood by the bagful on the Kolchansk fronts, and you hear. But when and a bottle from them, Putin, the Americans will hand me over as a pindos, and you'll be bending over and taking off your coats, and you'll be, there's a fine line here. That Prigozhin crossed when he said, what are you? We just backed it up and the march of justice. Well, it's clear that he went for the money. Otherwise, he would have been a fool not to turn around, to run around like a rabbit in that plane, which is flying straight into the ground on August 23rd. But this is a fine line where the returning SVO combatant thinks he has some special rights because he heroically shed blood. You haven't gained anything. You are nobody. They can do whatever they want with you. Even, I repeat, sell you to the Americans or hand you over directly to a homosexual brothel. And you won't do anything. You'll work there. You'll toil there. In well-known places. That's exactly what they're telling you. Don't you really understand? That you will truly have to deal with Trump and indeed with Musk. And in front of Musk. In front of Trump. All of you. Each and every one of you. In front of Trump. And we don't need any whining here. I see it's already spreading in the Z channels. No one will pay attention to that. That's all.
Continuing, you remembered that indeed today Trump extended for another year a number of sanctions imposed against Russia. These are the sanctions, notably introduced starting in 2014. And these are the sanctions that are, so to speak, the freshest 3-year ones. Tomorrow is the anniversary in Ukraine. I also didn't hesitate and went to the comments on Russia Today because they, in general, published it. I thought, what's going on there and what are the sentiments? In general, of course, the Russians themselves say, well, yes, that rapprochement that was sold to us and everything else, although, by the way, today, information was spread that the Kremlin is sending out guidelines saying not to praise Trump too much because if the negotiations are not successful, then, well, we can say we tried and tried, but it didn't work out.
It's an ideological safeguard, so they shouldn't have illusions.
Neither here nor there. And these sanctions, which in essence nothing new has happened, meaning Russia continues to live in the same system, in the same coordinates as before, but it seems that there is hope there too I don't know how much you follow sociology, but it really shows that Russians are on the curve where they would like the war to end, sanctions to be lifted, and Western brands to return. I know that as you do now, you will say that this doesn't affect anything. But at the same time, it seems that Trump also shows that no, look, you don't need to flirt with me. If I took a step towards you, do something for me, and you did nothing.
And you did nothing. So he said, nobody, you go ahead and negotiate a ceasefire. And they say no. They repeated this several times, even after all these arrivals and everything else. No. Well, how is it no? We are meeting about something there, talking. No, you will give us everything, Trump. Wait a minute. What do you want? Lift the sanctions. Come on. I won't lift the sanctions until you do this. Well, hold on. But all of this was predicted. It was all talked about. Trump just lost in this, not Moscow. It's important to understand that it was Trump who lost. Then you're the fool, it turns out. You fell for it. You publicly set yourself up. And what is he saying now? No, I thought just like that Trump, probably Zelensky is not a dictator, not 4%, dear friends. Probably it's Putin who is the dictator. Yes, Putin. I told Macron that I won't consider Putin a dictator. Probably, this EPO probably never elected, not even once. Probably so, yes. And the sanctions, it's not for nothing after all. How many people has he killed? And I said that it's unclear who started the war, that Zelensky started the war. That's what was being said. Ukraine and so on. You understand that you can tumble around, of course, but that also has its limits. Because at some point they'll say, wait, you were telling us something completely different. You promised us something else. Why are you spinning around now? Why are you doing this? Now everything is different. Do you understand? You've alienated us from our allies. Ukrainians, who are already one of the most complimentary people towards Americans, are hard to find. Now you led them into such a situation as if it was unclear who is an advisor, who is an enemy, who is a friend. Why did you do this? What did you achieve in the end? But I wanted the best, I thought. What about Putin? He was supposed to stop crushing people, but he doesn't stop. I offered him this, and he acts like that. Well, of course, and undoubtedly the fact that Moscow is activating these safeguards, it does so only to really. What if Trump suddenly starts declaring tomorrow that Putin is a jerk? And we'll have to explain that somehow. But we told you that this. No, we're changing the manual now. The fluctuations are too sharp. And then, of course, we have to work with Kirienko's presidential administration to earn our salary. They have to control all this, fine-tuning, manual control, ultra-manual control. And on this side, in America, there are no manuals. There's nothing. The press is already bashing Trump for all this. It doesn't stop, so to speak. But at some point, it's message. And in America, it's the first 100 days. When they evaluate the president-elect, the winning candidate, and they already give him assessments considering the ratings and everything else. They ask the question, why did you do this in these 100 days?
30 passed, let's say. A third will pass conditionally.
Third has passed. Still not much. Well, let's wait. Soon, so to speak, we need to wait 2 more months. You can't just cut it off immediately. But he's already done a lot in 30 days. He can either correct them, soften them, or somehow balance them. To become Biden again, he might theoretically, under the influence of circumstances and refusals in Moscow, There is no prospect. That's what we're trying to say. There is no prospect because you've encountered a completely different phenomenon. Not a deal with a party in it represented by Moscow, but you've encountered the devil and the devilish essence from the East that wants the destruction of life as such. Not to agree on you getting a ruble and me getting a ruble, living well on these 2%, like in a joke. This won't happen. 100%, they take it all. How is this not understood? The essence of this power is not understood. They always proceed from the assumption that this power has a material interest on that side. Well, Trump has a material interest, so what? But for them, it's a super interest, it's different, serve everything there. Material is understood to mean everything, from money and caviar prostitutes to Ukrainian territories and preferably all European ones. But I want to say again, this is in dynamics. This dynamic will change. You will see these roller coasters going up and down. It won't be, so to speak, one-dimensional. It won't be By the way, at some point in these amplitudes, these American hormones, we will realize that perhaps the scariest thing is that Trump is not an agent of Krasnov at all, because he was never recruited by anyone, which is even worse, because if he is ideologically like that, it's unknown what to expect next. You see, if he perceives the world this way, as I already mentioned, like an artist, Ostap Bender painted Sour Urabianin, and I see the world this way, why are you picking on me? If he sees the world this way, that today you can destroy the Euro-Atlantic unity and this consensus, which took decades to build with a couple of decisions, and I'll just hit you with 25% right now, and that's it. Are you normal? Then why did you create the WTO, gathered this civilized world into the G7 to regulate all processes? Gathered, talked, clarified everything. You are your own, you are friends, you are allies, you have the same values. How can you negotiate more easily with those whose values are diametrically opposed? With Putin, Xi Jinping, and so on. So they, it seems, have reached an agreement, and Lavrov went to Iran negotiating a deal. I want to ask a question. So let's say Moscow promised we're now all raw, advising everything, we'll resolve it. Yes, everything will be fine. Does any sane person believe that you can make a deal with Iran and that they will uphold their commitments? Just one. There was this IAEA nuclear deal that was canceled. Does anyone believe that they will adhere to their commitments to exit the nuclear weapons program? Just one sane person believes in that. It's like believing that Hamas will never attack southern Israel, but you need to have faith in approximately the same way. Well, please use Moscow. You need to use Israeli F-35 planes to prevent this from happening. Not Lavrov, who went and said, listen, we'll pretend we've agreed, you also give a nod and do whatever you want. We don't care what they want. Do you understand? You go ahead and say, like, we won't make nuclear weapons. Please lift the embargo so we can feed the 90 million people in Iran. Well, it's like, you understand, right? We are pretending for this regime and you pretend too. That's how they will negotiate. I'm simplifying. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. It's clear that this is somewhat of an eccentric picture, but its essence is exactly that. Commitments mean nothing to countries that disregard international law, their own obligations, voluntarily taken at some point, treaties, agreements, and so on. You don't talk to them like that. He said, peace through strength. So where is your strength? In relation to Ukraine, are you serious? So peace through strength, is it? This is not in relation to Moscow, not in relation to the disturbers of this international peace, but in relation to Ukraine. Well, that's nonsense. Well, that's nonsense. To go so far as to say that Ukraine attacked, well, like, okay, don't be offended. It's like we're giving Putin a kind of carte blanche, sending him a kind of signal like, look, we can even say this, and you give us a peace treaty, a demilitarized zone with the British and the French. And then he responds with a simple thumbs up gesture, and that's it. And what then? What will you do, Trump and his administration? Will you take back the words you've already said, which have led to actions? But excuse me, these are real actions, not just words in an interview or on Twitter, on the X network, or wherever he said about Zelensky. He later said, well, he's basically a good guy. I mean, I like him, It's clear that he backtracked. It's clear that he doesn't like him, but he's forced to say so because he said too much before. Under the influence of a conversation with Putin and the close feeling that I, Trump, will now negotiate peace with Putin, you won't negotiate peace with Putin. Don't harbor these illusions because you can't make a deal with the devil. That's all.
I remind you that just yesterday, Donald Trump said that we will still fight to reclaim the territory. When you ask if he will take back his words, well, today he took them back regarding Zelensky, but that's interesting.
He means perhaps Elena, he might mean that you will leave Kursk and they will give you a piece of the Kharkiv region. He might not do that.
That's understandable, but it directly contradicts the words you recalled from both Lavrov and Peskov, who said, no, this is already ours. So here he will also have to somehow be accountable for his words. But I will remind you of the words of Mark Rubin, the Secretary of State, who said that the next week will show how much Russia wants to end the war and achieve peace. And right now, they are precisely watching for this. And today's meeting, we talked about how the dates were jumping around. Trump said that the Russians and Americans were supposed to meet on the 25th, and the meeting was moved to today. It took place in Turkey, which is surprising, or maybe not surprising, you will say now, but there is no information. The negotiations were completed, the delegations got into their buses and dispersed, although the meeting itself lasted more than 6 hours. I don't even know what can be discussed about a diplomatic mission for 6 hours. We will send 100 people. No, you will send 95. These will be the ones. No, we do not accept those. According to Russian and Turkish media, the meeting was purely technical. I believe it, I understand, but usually after any meeting you come out and say the same nonsense. The meeting was indeed very good. The conversation was absolutely wonderful, but here truly nothing. Not a word.
Because they were talking again about Ukraine and the parameters of the peace agreement, and under the guise of, so to speak, resolving issues of the work of diplomatic missions, this smoothing out of possible conditions is hidden, and there's nothing to come out and say. Because to be honest, you can discuss for 100 hours the resumption of diplomatic representation in a sufficient number of administrative issues that need to be resolved and so on. The opening of missions, all of this is so, well, how can I say it can be discussed over the phone as if diplomacy has only existed since yesterday. They don't know to resume, terminate, reduce, renew what's allowed, what's not. It's nonsense. Surely there were representatives of the special services who discussed the peace agreement parameters. They didn't agree on anything. Yes, they agreed that nothing should be said publicly right now. We'll continue this, that's all. But I think they just can't agree, that's all. So they, I'm sure, discussed Ukraine in the first meeting, saying they didn't discuss what they were going to agree on resuming the full operation of our hyper representations. That's how it's resolved over the phone. They just arrived, the staff let them in, accredited them, and so on, got permission, but there's no passport. They just can't agree. And the fact that Lavrov comes out and says publicly what they say is evidence of the impossibility to agree. Once again, Moscow marks a reference point from which it does not intend to retreat even a millimeter. These 2 weeks will show nothing, as Rubio says, or several weeks will show nothing. Everything will just hang like this, and let's continue to consult further. But the more these meetings, these consultations, meetings in Istanbul, in Riyadh, whether they gather in Beijing or even on Mars, the more Moscow benefits from it. Because thanks to the prospect of resuming full-fledged relations with the US, the cessation of what seems like bilateral confrontation, perpendicular plots arise, as I already mentioned. Putin has already been whispering to the current president of Syria. Well, it's clear what he was talking about. I give you money, you give me bases. Well, what was he talking about? Well, about what? Well, about the fact that we can't give up Assad. He's a jerk, but we won't give him up. Otherwise, if we give him up, no one will trust us. As with the dictatorships we interact with, whether in the Central African Republic or elsewhere, therefore, this conversation could only take place against the backdrop of ongoing changes. They are about general matters, arts in nature, and cover a wide range of topics. So to speak, the public draws inspiration from Hungary and Slovakia to some place like Brazil. Just like that? Well, look at that. And in this sense, Moscow is winning. You understand? Moscow is already reaping the benefits from this. Already, and America is getting nothing. It's only going into the negative. And that's why these consultations won't stop in a week or two, or in April, or at Easter, or on May 9th. They will keep going on. And Moscow will keep dragging it out. The question is, how long can Trump pretend that intense work is ongoing? What is his time frame? Well, I'm asking our viewers rhetorically. How long can one pretend? Well, you know how people behave in such situations? Pretend for a long time. Yes, we are here. Considering that no one elects Putin and there's no one to hold him accountable, but Trump is elected and there are people to hold him accountable. The opposition, the press, public opinion, and the Republican establishment. So how's your plan? Such a question. And where is Trump's plan? Also a rhetorical question. I've already talked about this many times on different broadcasts. Where is Trump's plan to settle things? He talks about exchanging territories. You point this out, Alina. Which territories to exchange? Kursk for what? This Californian peace. The plan for which Russian troops up to Vovchansk Or which ones, or Zaporizhia, or in the Kherson region, or in the Donetsk region, which territories are being discussed? He doesn't specify. Maybe get something, but Ukraine has to concede. So what about Ukraine? What does it have to do? It's about its territory. The Kursk region, that's a special issue. Moscow wants it to be given to them for the troops to enter the Sumy region, and that's it. You saw Putin the other day. He says, here, the 181st Brigade reached the border. Somewhere on the side they reached, okay?
Yes, he says they crossed and meant that they entered the Sumy region.
Well, some section possibly. I haven't been following that. Let the leadership of the command of the armed forces of Ukraine comment on that. But it's said with such a tone, we're already in Podil, near Kurbanova's apartment. Surrender. You understand, it's to create a psychological atmosphere of defeat. Everyone lost. Ukraine is done. They're in Podil, already entering Bankova, going through offices, opening storerooms, eating dumplings, snacking on lard. That's how it is, creating a psychological atmosphere. And some succumb to this psychological influence. Well, of course, they succumb. And they think, well, yes, that's it. We've lost. We need to sign the capitulation. And partly, Trump's American entourage operates within the same paradigm. You had 3 years. Did you watch Jeffrey Sachs? Jeffrey Sachs speaks and says, oh, what are you doing?
Who criticizes, right?
Yes. He talks about Russophobia in the Baltic countries, where you have 25% of the population. Well, okay, fine. But he calls Ukraine a loser. Well, in English, loser means someone who has lost, and in slang, it sounds even worse than someone who has lost in normal human language. Well, fine. And this fellow who is a globalist, who is with the IMF and the whole set, Jeffrey Sachs, what is he even looking for in Russia? By the way, Jeffrey Sachs is like a Jew Mason in one person. And he therefore says that Russia must be taken into account. Russia is there, everything up to the 20th. And with such pressure as if the Ukrainians bit off Moscow's backside, and therefore they owe her something. Well, I refer you to look at this guy who was sitting on money all the time. Now he's here telling everyone how to behave. And who are you? I want to ask him famously, like Poniatowski, with this nonsense. Who are you? He therefore is telling someone how to behave. Don't defend your national security. Stop Russophobia. What is this person even talking about? What Russophobia is he talking about? So troops have invaded a neighboring territory, and you're supposed to consider their interests. For what? So that they don't continue invading towards the Baltics, or what? I don't understand at all. It's very convenient to turn everything upside down. Turn it around and say, well, you can live like this too. Well, it's impossible to live like this. And why did you create these military alliances? Why did you create Western integrated structures? From the North Atlantic Alliance to all sorts of, 10 eyes, 5 eyes, you created something else bizarre. And suddenly, when faced with a real danger, nothing works. We need to understand, we need to take it into account. This is a nuclear power. We are afraid. Well, if you're afraid, then just give up everything in the world. So who is it in Washington? Is it Simonian sitting there somewhere, or who is it? Who the hell knows? Exactly. But is that how it turns out then? Why did you build all this then? The structure of transatlantic security, indeed, some kind of accumulation of obligations. If you are so easily ready for any of this, hey, you are actually ready to back off, and moreover, to go far, far, far away. In fact, truly, let's give everything to them, but they are scary. And what about you then? Well, I'm just saying that if the West continues to demonstrate this weakness, then exactly in those places where this weakness is evident, Moscow will move in. Where the West says, well, that's it, take a break, you'll be surprised how quickly Moscow will take advantage. Why are you doing this? We weren't talking about this. That's how it works. We keep talking and talking, and it's clear they sense us. They are not obliged to listen, of course. Maybe they don't get it. That's another question. But it shouldn't be that the opposing side, using their proxies, instills this sense of psychological defeat, inevitable capitulation, and so on, to the point where it seems like there are no other options left, whether for the elite, the soldier in the trench, or the population. This should not happen. Do you understand? Whether we are coping with this or not, the end will show. The finale will show whether we succeeded or not.
We talk a lot about whether it will be able to defend its place and right to even sit at the table, including the European Union. It's no coincidence that we see Macron, who was with Trump, whom he didn't meet on the porch, and today it's Starmer. In a week, European leaders will gather to appoint a special envoy for peace negotiations among themselves, although it still seems strange because the Americans say, well, no, you still won't be there. But I want to ask you something else. Unfortunately, it's a misconception that Ukraine can manage on its own or that Europe can manage without America. That's why there is such an effort to establish these relationships. President Zelensky recently mentioned that Ukraine can provide for itself about 25-40, depending on the different nomenclature. It's clear that we have patrons, benefactors, Akhmetov, who is giving 11 billion to the armed forces of Ukraine, and the Prytula Foundation. He might be giving, well, but it's necessary, yes, as if he is a benefactor. But in reality, as a citizen of this country, he is obliged. The Return Alive Foundation is trying to invest something, but it's a drop in the ocean. Even if we talk about the size of the armed forces of Ukraine, it's still a drop. Yeah, the European Union provides another 25%, and yet the largest main portion comes from America. So should we calculate some scenarios, what to do if at some point, and America is saying this, and Mark Rubin said this week that they in general will no longer be benefactors and patrons for NATO, for Europe. Can we manage without it? Or is this a misconception? And that's why even if they call you a dictator and you have 4%, you still go and sign an agreement that no one fully understands what it's about.
Absolutely. Regarding Europe, let's answer this question. In the current state of Europe, as it appears now, without a unified European army, without a real center for managing European affairs, a political center, that is, it's not the EU, it's largely an economic union. It aspired to become a political union. You know, there was a project by Giscard d'Estaing in the Constitution. For those who might not know, Giscard d'Estaing wrote a draft, the late former president of France, and it didn't pass either in referendums or in parliament. And in general, it was scrapped. It even mentioned the role of the Christian church in the creation of Europe as a political entity. If it had been like that, maybe there would have been some chance there, theoretically. There's nothing. America stands alone. Decisions are made there. There is one president, one Congress, and so on. Well, the whole set of institutions that have a singular nature, so to speak, in essence and function in a way that is quite unique in its own right. But in Europe, there is no unified Europe, no United States of Europe. There was some idea, for example, in the 19th, 20th century to create such a United States of Europe. They were realized in that form through the Maastricht agreements, the Trilateral Commission, and later the EU, the single Eurozone. But this is an economic union, and it turns out, you might be surprised, how it happened that the main issues are not economic but security issues. The principles on which Europe stands, protected by this very security, defense capability, and so on. It turns out this is the main thing. This is primary. Everything else follows from this. This is about Zlata and Bulat. Remember, we quoted Alexander Sergeyevich. It's all related. That is, it turns out if you have nothing to protect your values with, if you lack the will for this, then there will be no economy and there will be no money. Europe is wealthy. It has money to help Ukraine. It has military production. It has armies. It has nuclear weapons. The United Kingdom and France have enough to blow Moscow and all its allies to smithereens. Well, just purely arithmetically. I'm not even mentioning delivery systems and everything else. It has its own space forces. France has enough satellites, everything else, it launches them itself and so on. There is scientific potential in Switzerland, France, the UK, and so on. In the military sphere, I mean, in terms of military technology and advancements. So the problem is not in the material component in this field. Yes, it is weaker, it is worse without America, it is more modest. And above all, in the decisions that are made regarding the use of this potential thoughtfully, thoroughly, and with great care. And excuse me, there is Hungary, which says that Moscow should be supported. And there is Britain with France, and there is Scholz, Germany. Well, let's just hope that this indeed changes. You understand, it's like in Krylov's fable, where everyone pulls in different directions, different sides. You create a unified army with generals who have saber-like teeth, who will say, yes, let's drop a nuclear bomb. It's not scary at all. Those are the ones who should come, not in tights, but those who say, yes, we'll kill everyone, destroy the whole planet. And believe me, you'll be surprised and it won't hurt at all. It's astonishing when such people come, saying it's fine, we'll all die, let's just throw nuclear missiles around, whether into the ocean or across the eastern border. Everyone says, are you crazy? What are you doing? They immediately start negotiating, sitting down. No, we shouldn't do that. Launching missiles with thermonuclear warheads at Moscow right away. Are you even sane? No, let's negotiate. And as soon as it starts, at all costs avoid war. At all costs avoid a confrontation with Moscow. At all costs prevent a nuclear war, a third world war, a fourth world war, and so on. Let's do everything, concede everything, withdraw from here, surrender everything just to prevent this from happening. Regarding the army, I read, they say, oh, citizens might die there. This is my contingent. Imagine people in the army might die. Why did he sign the contract? The majority of 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 European armies, these are not conscripted. These are contract armies. That is, a person goes, signs, I am ready to die. And in return, you pay me a salary for this. Well, the logic should be like that. You're joining the army, not going to work in a library. And they are surprised. Imagine how much the Crusaders have degenerated. People didn't live more than 30 years, roaming Europe with spears. And now you see how is it to die in the army or even kill someone? It's like a human right or something else. LGBT rights or something else. Are you even normal? What are you discussing? That's the problem of Europe, which is currently unable to help Ukraine to the necessary extent precisely due to the lack of this willpower. And if you want administrative, political as well, when these unified institutions, unified centers arise, well, if NATO doesn't work, then we need to create another NATO. Well, that's logical. You gathered to say, let's create an army. We base it, I don't know, in Brussels or London or Paris. What difference does it make? We start deploying these units. Let's directly send contingents to the Baltic countries, Finland, Ukraine. The Ukrainian army as a component of this European army. Oh, how will Moscow react? What difference does it make how Moscow reacts? Why are you concerned about how Moscow reacts? And how will Washington react? It has always been jealous of attempts at NATO parallelism. Who cares how Washington will react now? You do it and we'll see what happens. Look at Trump. He does something, not always successfully, so to speak, and the consequences, he doesn't think about them. But maybe it's a contagious thing. Maybe we can finally behave like that too. Take on this subjectivity, the source of this initiative, and if you don't do it, then nothing will happen. That's quite obvious. I think that economically, Europe can manage without the USA, at least for a year or two of war. It can manage, but if there's a deficit of will, if it's absent, then it won't last even a day. It won't be able to, you see, because it's necessary to finally decide that defending Ukraine is defending Europe itself, not just Ukraine, which we can choose to help or not. As soon as Ukraine is gone, you're next. And it won't be any other way. There are no other options.
We'll look at Merz's policy. He's somewhat new with some new ideas, and he talks about the need to get closer to France. A German political analyst explained to me today, he says, I understand that the issue is that many European countries lacking a nuclear umbrella, nuclear weapons, feel unprotected in relation to the Russian Federation. I said, oh, then from the Europeans, of course, one wouldn't expect, for example, strikes on refineries, which Ukraine allows itself to do. Nevertheless, we will see if he can add new momentum to the European Union and NATO countries that are on the European continent.
I have a simple question. Can't Britain and France start deploying mobile complexes with nuclear weapons?
That's just what they started talking about. So Britain and France are going to, but they are going to propose it. We will see how it works out. And I just thought, when you mentioned Orban, it's interesting what his face was like today when Trump extended sanctions against Putin, because he often didn't allow the advancement of European sanctions. And now his main patron set this example. Okay, in any case, tomorrow will be another important day around. Let's see if Donald Trump remembers who President Zelensky is, especially after today's trends. But there will definitely be statements and important negotiations, that's 100%. And we, friends, as always, will be telling you all about it and analyzing it on Saturday. Don't forget to leave us a like, subscribe to the Figgin channel, like and subscribe to the Kurvanova channel, like, comment on our broadcast, all your remarks and opinions are always important to us. And of course, thank you to everyone who watched us on social network X and on Telegram, Mark Figgin. Friends, thank you very much. See you, Mark. Thank you. See you on Saturday. Yes, all the best to everyone.
We'll see Alena on Saturday, and tomorrow we will have a broadcast with the leader of the band Nogusvelo, Maxim Pokrovsky. Join us for the 3rd anniversary, and we'll discuss the responsibility of the artist and other related topics. Goodbye, everyone.